Top 10 tips for epic hyperlapses with the Insta360 One X2 and One R. And these are two cameras that in my opinion are the best choices for the hyperlapse effect because of the quick and seamless editing experience inside both their mobile and desktop software. Tip number 1 is making sure your clip is the right length. Having a clip that is too short to begin with won't give you enough footage to speed up into an awesome looking hyperlapse. Take this one for example. Here I started with a clip that was 3 minutes and 23 seconds, but after speeding it up, it left me with 10 seconds. Whereas if I'd only started with 20 seconds of footage, that would leave me with about 1 to 2 seconds of usable hyperlapse. It's better to have too much footage to work with than too little, so always overestimate how much footage you need for a good hyperlapse. At the absolute minimum, I'd suggest 2 minutes, at the max 20 minutes, because just like you can have hyperlapses too short, they can also drag on too long. Tip 2 is pick your speed wisely. Sometimes hyperlapses can end up looking too quick or too slow, which is why every time you're editing a hyperlapse, you should try multiple speeds to see which one looks the best. So for a really long clip, like this 18-minute 360 video that I took on the ferry from Manly to Circular Quay here in Sydney, if I were to play that at 4 times the speed or even 16 times the speed, it would take over a minute to get from start to finish, which defeats the purpose of hyperlapse. It's supposed to be snappy. So if you're starting with a lot of footage and there's not that much happening in your hyperlapse, then consider speeding it up drastically to even 64 times, which is what I ended up using with this clip. On average though, the ideal speed for the average scene that you're probably going to be shooting is going to be 16 times speed. But again, it's subjective on the clip you're shooting, and always test different speeds with every hyperlapse you make. Tip 3 is when you're shooting hyperlapses, always do your best to walk or navigate in a straight path if you can. If you're constantly changing directions and you speed that up into a hyperlapse, it's going to leave your audience dizzy and confused. So the ideal hyperlapse location is one where you can navigate in a somewhat forward motion. Like here on the beach, I was literally just walking from one end to the other, which made it feel so much smoother and almost like a drone shot. And that helps make it a little bit easier on the eye. My next tip for epic hyperlapses is turning direction lock off. Direction lock keeps the perspective locked on the direction of the camera. And if you're walking around with this thing handheld and you don't have a perfectly straight hand, it means the field of view is constantly going to be moving side to side. As you can see here in this clip on the beach, this is direction lock on and it's shaky as. This is not a good hyperlapse. So instead I turn direction lock off and look how much smoother that is. That really does help make the most of that awesome 6-axis stabilization and really only required basic keyframing to get the direction facing forward anyway. Situations where you may want to put direction lock on is if your camera is fixed to something. So let's say you have it mounted to a car and you know the camera is not going to move at all. But in most situations, I'd recommend turning direction lock off and keyframing the direction yourself manually. Tip number 5 is that you should consider reframing your hyperlapses. If you're walking a really simple path like my beach shot here, then showing it from start to finish actually starts getting a bit boring, which is where reframing in several directions is going to totally transform this clip into something completely different. So here I've animated it inside Insta360 Studio, which is Insta360's free desktop software, and I was able to create this really cool keyframed 360 hyperlapse, and this really is so much better and more engaging than facing the same direction the whole time. So any situations where there's not a lot going on in your environment, you will want to consider reframing to make your shot more interesting. This brings me to tip number 6, and that is using moving elements to your advantage. I'm talking about trees, people, buildings. As boring as these things can be in real life, when sped up at 16 times with the hyperlapse effect and motion blur, suddenly they turn into these blurry, cool looking patterns which really bring your hyperlapse to life. Whereas if I was just walking through an empty field, you'd have none of that stuff and it'd be a boring hyperlapse. So the more general detail in your environment, the better. Tip number 7 is to avoid stopping. This can be hard sometimes. Walking for 5+ minutes without stopping even slightly, it's a challenge, especially if you're in a busy city or an area where there's a lot of people. And we all know it. What happens when you're patiently waiting to get an awesome shot? people tend to stand in your way and they don't move and they don't take a hint. But I find when capturing these hyperlapses, the best approach is to be really obvious about what you're doing. So hold your camera up high and be very confident with what you're doing. When people see you in the distance, they'll see that you're making some kind of cool shot. They'll have no idea what you're doing, but they'll at least stand to the side if you're walking through a busy area. And if they don't, practice your best ninja skills of weaving in and out of people if you can. Just try your best to avoid stopping, because when you stop, the hyperlapse stops and you can't continue it. Unless you want to take the time to manually go and re-edit the pauses out later, which adds an extra step to the workflow. It is possible, but if you can avoid it, then you should. Tip 8 is that shorter clips can work with hyperlapses. You just need to slow them down a bit. So instead of going for a full-on 16 times hyperlapse of a 5-minute clip, instead you might want to go for a 4 times hyperlapse of a 1-minute clip. As long as what you're shooting is still interesting and the hyperlapse effect adds something, then shorter clips are absolutely possible when played back at a slower speed, like 2, 4, or 6 times the speed. Tip number 9 for epic hyperlapses is the pivot effect. This means walking around in circles around your subject. Here I tried it with my girlfriend and it didn't really work because she was too small. However, I found this cool birdcage looking thing in Sydney's Botanic Gardens and decided to pivot around that. So I went down the path near it, then pivoted around it 4 times and back in the direction I came. Now speed that up and that hyperlapse is looking good. Okay, the pivot is probably a bit fast, but that's okay. We can re-edit it. So here in Insta360 Studio, I've started at 16 times the speed, transitioned to 6 times as I pivot around it a few times, and then back to 16 on the way out. And this goes with the general principle of the more that is going on in your video, the slower you should go, the less that's going on, the faster. So don't be afraid to play with different speeds throughout your hyperlapse, so you can go fast, slow, according to whatever would work best for specific bits of your hyperlapse. Tip 10 is that hyperlapses look awesome from vehicles. Here we are back at the ferry clip, and the reason this looks so good is because you can see the ferry prominently in the hyperlapse. It adds a really nice contrast of a close element with the passing distant elements on the right hand side. And this would work super well with cars, bikes, boats, helicopters, planes, whichever vehicle you can attach your 360 camera to, you can get this cool hyperlapse parallax effect with. Now, as to actually how to make a hyperlapse, it's so easy, it barely even needs a tutorial, but I'm going to give you a 15-second one anyway. Open up either Insta360 Studio or the Insta360 mobile app. Choose the clip you want to edit, go to speed, select the portion you want to speed up, then choose the new speed you want the hyperlapse to be. By default, it will add the motion blur effect. You can turn it off if you want, but I recommend keeping it on. You won't be able to preview the hyperlapse until you export, so go ahead and do that. Then once exported, use that as a guide as to what needs to be changed to make the hyperlapse better. Rarely does it work well the first time, but when you do make a few changes to your hyperlapse, you can end up with some epic results like I got in this video. So that's my top 10 tips for epic hyperlapses with the 1X2 and 1R. I'll link both of these cameras below. Subscribe for more, and I'll see you next time. Peace.